Hi there, and welcome back to the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. I'm Brian Burr, joined as always by the founder of the Junior Golf Hub, Roger Nick. Roger, so glad to have a very special guest coming up today, Kelley Hester, women's golf coach at Clemson University. Boy, she's had a lot of success there. College golf just seems to get more and more important. Coming off of the KPMG, really interesting story out there as Amy Yang, listen, she's on my short list of great golf swings, but this is a really interesting story that she told me. She, before every tournament, has a nightmare that she's not ever going to get the ball in the hole on the first hole. Her anxiety might be worse than any player I've ever heard of. She asked her coach every year if he thinks it's obtainable for her to keep her LPGA Tour card that season. Not a lot of self-belief. 1 million second place finishes in her career. Why? Because anytime she was in a position to win, she really struggled to get it across the finish line. It wasn't easy at the KPMG, but she built herself a lead, and it was a great win on perseverance, and more importantly, overcoming, Roger, some of the things that golf can instill in players that other sports generally don't.
Yeah, no, it's so fun to see that happening and hear her story. And, I saw a few interviews and her talking about how it has just been so difficult for her to kind of, break through, if you will. Hopefully this is the breakthrough opportunity that she needs to continue thriving, if you will, and winning. It's very similar to a Ricky Fowler, right? I mean, you've heard him say the same things. His anxiety of just not getting the ball in the hole when he needs to has probably gotten in his way. But it's so fun to watch. It was so fun to watch her play. It was so fun to see. It was a struggle to finish, but at the same time, she won. She broke through. It happened, right? So that's a lot of fun to see.
For sure. An interview that I watched this week of Jordan Spieth, Roger, saying that his biggest problem is comparing himself today to himself when he was younger, and for a lack of a better word, it's tough to say, but a lot better. Jordan Spieth as a 19-year-old was a lot better than a 28-year-old. And boy, that is a whole new animal to try to justify or put into perspective. How am I getting worse when I'm working so hard?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, right? You hear people say that, you hear players say that they're regressing, they're going backwards, they're not getting better. They were better when, but the reality is that he's much better now based on the knowledge that he has of the game, the experiences traveling all over the world, playing at every level of event, right? So it's hard when players like that compare themselves to when they had nothing in their lives but golf, right? I mean, he's a family man, he's a businessman, he's got all other things pulling at his coattails, if you will. So it's very interesting when guys and gals say that about themselves. I would be very interested in hearing on the women's perspective, because they mature so much earlier than boys and men. I think we're still maturing, Ryan, but I think it'd be very interesting to hear Coach Hester's kind of point on how the women are dealing with success early in their careers, and then they take that leap to go to play professional golf in the women's LPGA. And then what happens, right? What happens when they don't have the same success they have in the college ranks? I think that would be very interesting to hear.
Well, I think we're going to have that wish granted. We welcome Coach Hester to the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. It's a real treat to have you on the podcast. Each week, we have coaches from all over the country, men's and women's, kind of discuss, junior golf, making it to the next level. The conversation we're having right now is stemmed from Amy Yang, who I've kind of been inside that camp a little bit. And Amy's anxiety coach is a nightmare before every round of golf she has a nightmare that she's never able to ever get the ball in the hole on the first hole. It's an infinity amount of strokes, and she fights anxiety. She claims that's why she has such a difficult time getting across the finish line. And I'm sure maybe not to that extent of that nightmare, but anxiety in golf, it's not talked about a ton. But we were discussing Jordan Spieth, who says he's having such a difficult time because he can't help but compare himself to a Jordan Spieth 10 years ago when he was a lot better player. And that's so hard for him to understand. How could I be so much better 10 years ago than I am now? And I'm sure part of your job as the head coach at one of the most successful programs out there is psychologist. How much do you work on the brains of your players, if you will?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say that the anxiety piece is huge. And if we could deny it and say that it's not, but at the end of the day, if you were to poll these young men, young women, people on tour, whatnot, regardless of the level of their success, and in coaching too, I'll be honest, like, we don't know if the players that we recruit are going to come to college and do great or not, 18 to 22-year-olds. But I would say we do a Google survey every Sunday at 5 o'clock. Takes my players about a minute to fill out, and it just tells me where they are on a scale of 1 to 5, academically, emotionally, and physically. So it gives us a little glimpse into their mindset and their psyche. Sometimes we don't have individual time with them until Tuesday or Thursday, depending on their schedule. And so if it's higher than a 3, we just ask them to explain. And, just to get ahead of the week, because we have a tendency just to, we're all so busy, you just keep doing, you just put your head down, keep doing, and never really check in on people. So that allows our students to have a really easy touch point just to let us know what's going on with them. And if there's something going on that we need to help them see about, we can do that early in the week.
Where'd you get that idea?
I've been coaching a really long time. I would say I probably borrowed it from our strength trainers who would do it just to check in on kids physically, how they felt. But, in today's world, we know that the mind and the body are so connected that you can ask where somebody is physically, but if you don't also ask mentally, then you're not getting the full picture.
That's really impressive. No wonder you have so much great success in your career. So kudos on that, because that is a big deal, right? I mean, obviously the PGA Tour, Grayson Murray, just obviously what happened. The PGA Tour now announcing they have a mental trailer that's going to be traveling with the tour. Hopefully the LPGA follows suit, or it actually is happening. But Coach, with that being said, your success is built on success. I mean, everywhere you've gone, you've had success. Your players have had success. What's the secret? How'd you do it?
Well, there's no pixie dust. You just, you look for good kids who want to get better and who are intrinsically motivated. I think in today's world in college athletics with NIL and everything else, there's just more extrinsic motivation. But at the end of the day, we all know that can be empty, right? If you're not filling yourself up from the inside. So I've always looked for pretty good athletes who were good students, who were fairly low drama, and who just wanted to get better for themselves. And that's an equation that has proven well at Clemson and Furman and Georgia and Arkansas and UNLV.
Yeah. So when you say that's a part of it, so what do you do to make them continue to stay on track, right? And what is the real secret here? We're going to go deep. What's the secret of a day in the life with you as the coach in the program? Obviously, it's working.
Probably one thing that I might do that's a little different than what some other programs might do is I spend an hour a week with each one of my student athletes. So half of them are on Tuesday, half of them are on Thursday. And that's an extra, 10 hours to your schedule. But I just find that it's really valuable to meet your students where they are. And sometimes it's about golf. Sometimes it's not about golf. Sometimes it's Zooming a lesson with their swing instructor. It can be whatever that student wants. But I think that's one of the things that that I've done consistently. And my college coach at Georgia did that, Beans Kelley, a million years ago. And it meant a lot to me as a student athlete. And so I've always tried to look at my job through the eyes of the student, because I was one. And the reason I coach is because I was so heavily impacted and had such a great experience. So I try to always keep sight of the importance of, this is their experience. It's going to be about 4 years, maybe during COVID-5, but I want it to be the best 4 years of their life.
Coach, let's kind of jump into, you talked about anxiety, and that every coach, no one really knows for sure, regardless of the junior golf resume, how good that player ultimately can become. In your estimation, this is a pretty loaded question, but is there one area that you find across all of your stops that junior golfers probably are the weakest and have to make up the most ground? Maybe it's mentally, maybe it's the physical part of the weight room, that obviously in college that's a huge aspect that isn't necessarily in junior golf. But do you find that what is the biggest jump a junior golfer has to make when they get to big time ACC golf?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure there's a blanket answer. I alluded to it earlier. I think when people in general are intrinsically motivated, because they're doing it for themselves and not for the outside accolades or for their parents or their coach or whomever, I think that's a good measure of players that are going to be successful. And then there's one question that I ask recruits typically early in the process, and that is, what do they love most about golf? And my favorite answer is, I love to compete. Because the ones who want to compete are going to do whatever it takes to be able to do that at whatever level it is. And typically, if I'm on a panel, I'm going to be on a panel tonight for the First Tee. They have their national championship here at our Walker course, and invariably one of the things that I'm going to encourage them is to never lose sight of why you play the game and what you do it for. But that thought of competing is what keeps kids always trying to get better, because they just want to compete. And the ones who can learn that about themselves earlier, I think, have the most success. That it's not about, my least favorite answer is, I want to get a college scholarship. It's like, well, what are you going to do after you get your college scholarship? Because we're going to need that to be the beginning of the journey. But just that desire to want to keep getting better regardless of the level. And the great ones that I've had an opportunity to coach, like the Stacey Lewis's, like, she just kept getting better because she just loved to compete. And so not being scared to compete, and understanding that your journey is going to look different than somebody else's journey. I think comparison is the thief of joy, and we see it across all levels. Like, I guarantee you, Scotty Scheffler is not looking at what anybody else is doing right now, right? Like, he's got his hands pretty full himself, but he's just doing his thing, and he's doing it so well. But when we lose focus of what we do that makes us good and start focusing on what other people do that makes them good, I think that we can really get off track. And regardless of the skill level of a player, as soon as they take the focus off of what they do that makes them good, I think that's tough. And that's a lesson that we try to teach our college players. You've got to know what you do well. That's how you continue to be successful.
Yeah, Coach, with that being said, do you have a way or a system at Clemson that you are, hey, I have these athletes coming in. Obviously, you know that they're talented, or you wouldn't have recruited them into the program. But how do you keep that going? Like, do you have an assessment so they can go through on a weekly basis, a practice plan that you go, hey, I know if you do these things, this is what happens. How do you do that? How do you keep that going?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say that I have a formal process of assessing, but I have tried to focus really strongly on building a strong culture within the team. And I have a philosophy that it takes about 7 years to change a culture, which sounds like a long time, but that's when the players that you've recruited are helping you recruit. And when new players come into your program, your existing players are the ones that are saying, hey, this is how we do this. This is what it means to be a member of the Clemson golf team. So it's not the coach saying it or the staff saying it. We try to live it every day, but it's coming from their peers and from their teammates. And what I've seen over time is the stronger that culture is, the more students are willing to buy in because their teammates are buying in, and it's not just a directive from the coach.
That's really cool. Recruiting is obviously the most important part of any college team. Every coach will tell you that you got to have good players to be good. That pool of players just continues to get larger and larger. We did a study on Power 5 Division I women's golf, and there certainly is a pretty strong international flavor. In addition to that, you now have to deal with the transfer portal, which is essentially opening up an entire new list of candidates that potentially could come help your team. So when you're dealing with all these different countries, junior golf, portal golf, how do you even start? To me, that would be so overwhelming. You have thousands of players that potentially you can't look at them all. You certainly can't watch them all. How do you start your process of trying to find that perfect player?
Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming. June 15th was the first day that we could reach out to the class of 2026. And I would say over the last several years, that list of girls who I reach out to initially has gotten a little bigger, casting a wider net as our program has improved. This is just the 11th year. This was the 11th year that Clemson has had a women's team. So a lot of people, I grew up in Georgia. I didn't think anything about Clemson because they didn't have a women's golf team when I was growing up. But, I would say we traditionally have not had a lot of international players. I think that we may have been the only team that made it to match play at the NCAA championship this year with an entirely domestic team. But that being said, with NIL and, there's some perceived question marks with the ACC. I think, the Big Ten and the SEC are, directing that narrative to some degree that creates some question marks for student athletes. Recruiting has been tough. And so we've been forced to lean more on the international piece. And next year we have an international player coming in. 2025, we have another international player coming in. But there are enough rankings and events to get to that you're able to see players, but it's really hard to get to know them. The rules make it tricky for us not being able to communicate until, leading up to someone's junior year. I try to always know who the best players are in my state. I want to win my state in recruiting. And right now we have 4 players from South Carolina on our roster.
Wow.
4 of 7 that were on our team this spring. So that's important to me, but some years there's not going to be as many players in state. Next, I'm going to look in the Southeast. Then I'm going to cast a little bit bigger net if I haven't filled my quota, so to speak, of the incoming class, looking at the Southeast. But I would say for me personally, the international part will be my last circle that I would go to. And some coaches would go the opposite. I think if you were to talk to my coaching peer down the road at South Carolina, they have a largely international team, and they've had great success that way. So I think it depends on the program, but I start close to home and move out from there. That would be my first way of thinking about it.
Now, do you have any thoughts on the transfer portal? I know we hear a lot of coaches talking about that more and more. Obviously, having somebody had experience already in college, transferring into a program like a Clemson would be not ever taking a step backwards in most cases, right? And I'm sure the pressure at a Clemson program, you got to win. So how does that fit in?
Yeah, I would say we would look to fill in a gap maybe through the portal, but for the most part, we haven't lost players on our roster, which I'm really proud of. So that doesn't leave a lot of gaps. We've taken one player in the last 5 years in the transfer portal, Chloe Holder, but she's from Anderson, South Carolina, right down the road, and had come to our golf camp, and we knew her. We had a relationship with her. So I would look to it to fill in a gap if I needed to, but I don't necessarily budget money to fill a spot in the transfer portal.
And certainly a program where culture is so important. There's no right way. There certainly are schools that are almost predominantly using the portal now and trying to win using new players every year. But for a team that, as you stated, culture is so important. A 4-year player, obviously, when it comes to culture, having gone through every step is going to be able to teach that next group probably easier than someone that just pops in for a year, I would assume.
Yeah, I really, the transactional piece of college coaching is a fine line, and I try to stay away from it as much as possible. And it's hard to coach a player for 1 year. We do have an incoming player who was from the Ivy League, and due to COVID, they took 2 years off, so she's going to get a graduate degree here. That's a little bit of a unique situation. But I think it's a great thing, and it gives a lot of student athletes the opportunity as they improve to move up a level. But I also think that it crushes the teams that they leave. So I try to be a part of the solution and not the problem as much as I can.
That's great. What's your thoughts on the national program?
So the national team, the USGA national team.
Yeah.
Well, it's something that I have been a fan of over a long period of time, having coached some international players who had the benefit of competing on their own national team and those resources that come along with it. It's really left a gap for the American player, the high-level American player that just, you pretty much need to come from resources in order to play our game. And I think that, it's been a long time coming, but we have so many people that play junior golf and then amateur golf and then, hope to play professional golf in the U.S. that it's hard to target. But I'm a huge fan of Chris Zambri and what he's doing. I think he was a brilliant hire by the USGA, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this benefits USA golf. But it's going to take some time, right? Like, it's not an overnight fix, but hopefully we will eventually have more players in contention to win majors on the LPGA tour. That would be the long-term win.
A couple things. Certainly, we do want to dive into junior golf. I will ask you, the NCAA men and the PGA Tour have come up with PGA Tour U. I'm not sure I've ever seen a better partnership that the NCAA was involved in. NCAA's track history in the last couple of years hasn't been the greatest, but they hit a home run with this one. It's keeping kids in college. I mean, Gordon Sargent would have been gone for sure years ago. He's now staying in college because there's simply not a better path to the PGA Tour than PGA Tour U. As good as Korn Ferry is or PGA Merit, there's no better path. And we've seen it already with obviously what Ludwig Oberg did from Texas Tech in winning, making the Ryder Cup, et cetera. The LPGA doesn't have that with the NCAA. In fact, it, in my opinion, goes the other way, where you have kids leaving to go to LPGA Tour Q school in the middle of the college season when it's crunch time. I'm putting you on the spot here, but does the NCAA, the LPGA, do they need to come together here and fix what, in my opinion, there's a blueprint out there that works. Why not just follow it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And we lost our best player mid-year. Savannah Gruwall earned her LPGA status. So we removed a 70 stroke average from our lineup headed into the spring. But this has been an ongoing conversation. I'm also an LPGA professionals member. I had a nice conversation with Tommy T with the LPGA. He would be the one, I think, that would orchestrate this type of situation. And the LPGA is trying to figure out what their levels are. If they're going to acquire the LET, where that would go in, the Epson Tour. And I think that I think there is a future for it. But one thing that's really important to understand, and in my conversation with Tommy, he shed some light on this, and I'm not going to have the numbers right in front of me, so I'm going to ballpark it, but a really large percentage of the PGA Tour top 125 played at least 1 or 2 years of college golf. And on the LPGA, if you look at that same number, the 125, less than 40% played 1 year of college golf. Mm-hmm. So their numbers aren't coming from college golf in the same way that the PGA Tour is. And to be honest, I wasn't aware of that until I did have that conversation with him. However, a really large number of the Epson Tour players come from college golf. And, in a perfect world, if there was an LPGA U, I think, it would create a wonderful partnership, I think, between college golf and the LPGA. And it might keep some of those kids from going to Q school just because they need a place to play the summer after they finish their college career. And if they don't go to Q school, then they're not really guaranteed a place to play, because amateur golf can be a little bit tricky. There are quite a few options, but a lot of them are on top of each other. And it's expensive. So they go to Q school to see where they would end up on the Epson Tour. And then if they play well, it's like, well, wow, I might even, if I make it to third stage, I can't not go to that.
Right.
Because then I can see if I could possibly get my LPGA status. So, I think we don't currently have a situation. I'm not exactly sure what the PGA Tour calls it, but every once in a while when a player does exceptionally well, they're able to straight up earn, a non-senior can earn their status on the PGA Tour. It's like a generational talent type thing, right? I think Patrick Cantlay maybe, Gordon Sargent might have made it that way. So there's not currently something like that would have allowed a Rose Zhang an opportunity. I can definitely see that happening. And then, the road to the LPGA, an LPGA Tour U, even if it were just for spots on the Epson Tour, or one day if the LPGA acquires the LET, however they would position that, it would keep kids in school, because you miss like 3 or 4 weeks of school if you go to Q school. Yeah. And it would probably keep them on the team, throughout the end of their year. But that's just for seniors. And I think that, it's not uncommon in our world for younger than seniors to, if a player really has it, then they really have it. And so I don't know. We'll see if it happens, but I think it could be really cool and it'd be fun for people to follow. I don't know if you're going to see a lot of spots straight to the big tour, but even if it were just for a place to play that summer after they finish college would be great.
Yeah, with keeping that conversation going, I think there's probably a couple other things there to consider, right? I think it's the economics. I think for the LPGA and women's golf and, women transitioning from college, I mean, the value of a college education versus what they may make on their first couple of years on the LPGA Tour, I mean, there's an imbalance there. And I think that's another thing that I think if we're not considering or looking at, I think that's probably a bigger issue of that transition than it is whether there's spots on the LPGA Tour. Because listen, I mean, $300,000 or $400,000, college education versus I'm going to make $30,000 to go play on the Symetra Tour. Or I'm going to make, nothing playing on the LPGA because I don't make a cut the first year. Who knows, right? So I think it's a big jump. But I also, having talked to, the USGA and Coach Zambri and Heather on the USA, development program. I mean, that's also, it seems like an opportunity for some of the young girls coming up, getting some coaching, getting some resources, hopefully making, as you said, making that transition into LPGA and making a difference and having more winners out there from the, USA versus international. So I think there's things that are being done that's going to help that situation. But I would say the economics of a college value is somewhat greater than, hey, I'm going to go play on the LPGA Tour, especially for young girls and women in the U.S.
Yeah, no doubt. I would agree completely. You'd be preaching to the choir there. But, I think that there's a lot of programs now where even at Clemson, somebody can come back and finish their degree, which would be, sort of the argument there. But I've heard Stacey Lewis tell multiple people on a large stage, like, don't rush out here. This will be here for your entire life. And she was she played for 5 years in college golf because she redshirted a year with her back surgery. But as much as people can tell you, I still think it's challenging. And with NIL, those kids are already going to be making a little bit of money here and there. So it's not as big of a financial, decision. Hopefully, you could make a little money to stay in college. So we'll see. Hopefully the landscape will change. But if you look at the top programs in college golf, almost every top 10 or 15 team is going to lose a player every few years.
Yeah. Coach, we're running over, but I do want to get into some recruiting aspects of how you do it for our junior golf families. So let's just jump right into junior golf. Coach, you're at an event. Certainly, maybe there's one player that took you to that event, but your eyes are going to be wide open to other people in the field that maybe you haven't heard of that catch your eye. What is the best way to impress you when a junior golfer is playing an event and there are college coaches there?
Yeah, I would say, all of us are looking at how a player acts on the golf course. And I would just encourage them that if you have a bad hole or hit a bad shot, we as coaches don't mind seeing that because it's going to happen during a 4-year career. You're going to hit multiple bad shots. You're going to have multiple bad holes. And it's an opportunity for us to see how you react in that situation. And so rather than get freaked out that coaches are watching and I don't want to screw up, just see it as an opportunity to showcase who you are as a person. And that's important, like how you treat your parents, how you treat your competitors. That's the outside answer. I also like, I like to look at ball flight. So, sometimes the ball makes a different noise when certain people hit it, especially there's a bigger difference, I feel like, in women's golf than in men's golf there. I think almost everybody hits it hard in men's golf. But, just see it as an opportunity to show a coach what you're capable of, and know that, I think ultimately kids are going to end up where they're supposed to. And so when we let the chips fall where they may, that's a better read versus when we try to force it and make things happen. So probably a good life lesson there too, just to enjoy the journey and the process of it and know that what's going to work out is going to work out.
Coach, we hear a lot from a lot of our parents and our players about the rankings and playing in tournaments and kind of massaging your tournament schedule around the rankings, if you will. I like to ask this question to our coaches. If you had 2 players, one player who plays, let's call it 8 events, got their rankings really high. You got another player who plays in, let's call it 25 events, and their rankings maybe not as high, but their scoring average is similar. Let's call it 72. Who do you pick?
I'm not a real empirical person, so numbers are not necessarily how I make my decisions. So, and my assistant loves to look at a golf swing. Like for her, it's got to be she's got to really like their golf swing. I'm also not necessarily about a golf swing. But I think it's important that a player learn how to win, and then they continue to challenge themselves instead of step up to the next level, learn how to win at that level, then challenge themselves. So I like to see a progression, and I think, it's hard to know exactly, because there's just a lot of different factors, but I think it's important that players love what they're doing, and you can see that when you watch them play. So if that kid's playing 25 tournaments, I'm going to want to watch them and see if they love it. Then that's awesome. That kid loves to compete. And then if you play in 8 tournaments, is there some fear of failure there? Are you scared that you might mess up with your ranking? I was recently talking to somebody at the USGA about the Curtis Cup teams. And one of the things that she said was, we love to see that players are playing. They're not trying to protect their ranking. They're competing. They're testing themselves. So I think that funnels down to junior golf as well. Like, keep testing yourself, keep pushing yourself, and don't be scared to compete.
Last thing from me, Coach. Do you like to do the recruiting, or do you like to be recruited as well? And what I mean by that is, are you a fan of, before June 15th, some players that really have Clemson on their wish list, reach out to you via email or written letter and let them know a little bit about themselves and where they're playing, et cetera?
Yeah, it's good for us to know if a player's interested. Like I said, I like to start close to campus and then move out. So if there's a player not from our region or area who's interested in Clemson or has a tie to our university, I probably would not automatically recruit that person. So it's good to know if somebody's interested. It never hurts. And then I always encourage junior golfers to fill out the survey or the questionnaire that a team has, because it gets you in our system. So if we happen to see a junior player at a tournament, I can look in my database and see if we've seen them before. And if I haven't seen them before, they're in my system for a reason. So they must have shown some interest in us. So that just helps us. And I mean, we're in the South. The South isn't for everybody. So it's always good to know. I'm a Georgia girl. I grew up in the South. So, but I don't assume that everybody's gonna, love a small college town in the middle of the deep South.
With heat and humidity.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Coach, it's been a real pleasure having you on. First off, again, congratulations on all your success. I was fortunate enough to do the play-by-play for the ACC women's tournament this year, and saw so many of your players and how they handle themselves. So congratulations, not only on success on the golf course, but building some great young ladies into real role models. What you're doing has been pretty awesome to watch.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks, Coach. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Roger, certainly another coach, and I'm starting as we kind of start to build our own database, wanting to compete, not being afraid to compete. It seems like if they're, some people are for the portal, some people are for junior golf, some people are for speed, some people are for, great short games, international, domestic. But the one thing I think, men or women, we can agree on is everyone is pushing for a player that loves to compete. And certainly the Junior Golf Hub, I'm at a golf tournament right now. I'm at the Nota Begay, Florida Regional. We've got, a full field here, but each kid is being educated by the Junior Golf Hub staff on the junior golf ranking system and how it differs, how it promotes competition. And it's funny, I'm not even sure, I'll ask you the question, when you built this ranking system and tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it, not having done all of these podcast interviews, were you sure that was going to be know that was going to be the answer, that every coach wants to see players compete, and that's one of the reasons you built this JGR ranking system into what it is?
That's a great question, Ryan. I would say that as an athlete myself, I mean, and growing and learning and progressing, challenging yourself to play as often as you can because you want to get better, that just resonated with me. And as I got it more involved, I'm 25 years plus now in junior golf space, having been to thousands of tournaments and hearing the same questions about parents. What do I do? How do I get recognized? And my answer always has been, go play golf because you love playing golf. Go play because you want to get better. Go play and challenge yourself to learn how to win, progress through it, and take that next challenge to get better and go to, the higher level events when you're ready. So I think that has always stuck with me, in the sense of I know that it's important in development. I know it's important in society to kind of learn how to earn your way, not just kind of manipulate your way into something that you think you want and then get there and go, well, I don't know if I really want to play golf anymore, right? So it's really, it was based on the fact that I think, as an athlete myself, loving to compete, learning what I learned from the losses and the wins was really important. And hearing that from thousands and thousands of people over the years, it's the only way. I mean, and every coach has actually said it. We want to see a kid who loves to play the game and play often, progress on, learn how to win, learn how to, be humbled, if you will, and keep challenging yourself. So it had to be part of it, right? It can't just be some ranking that says you're there or not there. And we've seen the negative parts of that.
Well, I'm going to tell you a really cool story this wasn't intended, I don't think, by JGR, but this is what is happening. Now, obviously, Roger, when you grew up, I believe they had newspapers.
It was Stone. It was Stones.
Stone. But certainly when you and I were growing up, to see your name in the newspaper was the ultimate. I mean, that was just to see your first and last name in a newspaper was the thing. So I'm watching these two young kids be told about JGR, and I wasn't anticipating this happening, but both families went in two different directions, and one went into a golf cart, the other went under a shady tree, and they immediately looked up their son or daughter on JGH. And when the kids saw their name, and I have no idea if they could be last. I don't even know what it was. Not about that they had a high ranking. It was about seeing their name as part of something, mm-hmm. and the smiles on their faces. And, if you're watching, go to juniorgolfhub.com. You'll see the ranking system pop up. It's free right now. Pop on it, look at it, find your son or daughter and show it to them, because just watching, I was only out there for a bit of time, but to see these two children had the same reaction, to see their name on their parents' phone as a part of a ranking system, it was about the biggest thing that they'd ever achieved. And I just thought that was an inherent, really cool perk of JGR.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love hearing those stories, Ryan. That's why we do it. That's why we do what we do.
So as we continue to build and grow out, and an inherent problem, and I'm asking for your help at home. The goal of JGR is to have every kid ranked that has played a junior golf tournament. The reality is there are every day a new golf league, junior league of some sort, junior tour, is popping up around the United States, around the world, if you will. There's a new one that just popped up in Florida that, this is their first year. They've never done this before, but they have some cool perks and they're getting really nice fields. Well, we had never heard of this tour, and obviously because of that, they're not in the ranking system. So if you're playing a tour and you don't see your name ranked, talk to that tour director or call us or email us or tag us on the podcast and just let us know what the name of the tour is, so we can do some investigative work on how to make sure that tour gets involved in the ranking system, because we're in this together for sure with the families. We've built something that's bigger, better than anything that's been out there before. But we also understand that to get every kid ranked means we have to get every kid ranked. And that means we've got to know where they're playing. So if you do see your son or daughter playing and their event is not showing up, it's because that tour is not yet connected with the Junior Golf Hub. It will eventually happen, but the sooner the better. So if you can help with that, even if you just tag us on this podcast, we'd be happy to make that call and make sure that becomes part of the system. Right, Raj?
That's right. Well said, Ryan. That's what we need. We need everyone's help to get this, get all the scores recorded, so your son or daughter's name will pop up.
Absolutely. So certainly, thanks to Coach Hester, our producer and director. He continues to just knock it out of the park, lining up unbelievable talent in the coaching world each and every week. We couldn't do it without Michael Nick. He's been the rock star, Roger. You and I are his supporting cast in this thing, but he is
No doubt.
He is blowing this thing up. We'd love to see more and more people talking about the podcast. We thank you for listening. For Michael, for Roger, Nick, I'm Ryan Burr, and we'll see you real soon on the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast.